Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we're checking out this black-red rotation-proof Reanimator deck. So all the cards you see here will still be legal in standard with the release of Edge of Eternities, so nothing's gonna rotate out. And being a Reanimator deck, our plan of course is to discard some huge creatures and then bring them back cheaply out of the graveyard using effects like Zombify, which has been added to Foundations, so that's going to be around for a long time. So I've split the deck up into its three main components. We've got the discard outlets, ways to cheaply get those expensive creatures into the graveyard. Then we've got our actual finishers that we're hoping to reanimate. And then we've got our reanimation effects, including a Zombify. And then a small miscellaneous section that can easily be customized. Maybe with the next expansion we'll get some more tools that can replace them. But for now, let's take a look at some of our discard outlets. Bitter Triumph is excellent as it also doubles up as interaction. Can either discard a card or pay 3 life. We often want to be discarding a card as an additional cost to destroy a creature or planeswalker, so that can help out against other aggro decks. Then the Fear of Missing Out is actually one of the main role players in this deck, as it's also an enchantment creature, so multiple types for Delirium, and we care about Delirium for the fear itself, as we can potentially set up 2 attack steps in one turn, which will be very useful as we'll see in just a second. And then the Fear, when it enters, can also discard and draw. If we're empty-handed, we can just draw a card for free, so that's also pretty nice. Then there's Tersa Light Shatter, a 3/3 with haste. When it enters, we can discard up to 2 cards and then draw 2. So this can maybe discard multiple payoff cards at once to set up our graveyard. And then it's still a reasonable creature to maybe pressure opposing planeswalkers or just to trade off for opposing stuff. And then we've got a few ways to fill the graveyard, not by discarding but by milling instead, with Black Overlord can be impended for just 2 mana, and then it's also reasonable to hardcast or potentially even reanimate. And same goes for the Trumpeting Carnosaur, which isn't the most exciting card to reanimate, but it has that built-in discard outlet, as we can just pay 2 and a red, discard it to deal 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker, so it's very easy to get it in the graveyard, and then still reasonable to hardcast for 6 mana as well. Then the Red Overlord is usually something we'll want to discard and then reanimate as opposed to impending it, but having that flexibility is still nice, so we can maybe pay 4 mana to deal 4 damage, and then at a later point we'll still get the creature in play. Then we get to the real payoff cards, and the main one I want to highlight is Ardyn, the Usurper. This is the card we're really building our deck around. An 8 mana 4/4 says demons we control have Menace, Lifelink, and Haste, and we can generate demons with a second ability. At the beginning of combat on our turn, we can exile up to 1 target creature card from any graveyard, can include the opponent's graveyard as well. Then exile that card, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 5/5 black demon. So that's how we generate those hasty, menacing, life-linking demons, and a 5/5 is sometimes even an upgrade when it comes to reanimating some of our creatures. If we can make a 5/5 Fear of Missing Out, that's quite the upgrade over a 2/3. It has all those keywords, and more importantly, the Fear also has amazing synergy with Ardyn if we have Delirium enabled, because now the Fear gets to attack, untap one of our creatures, likely itself, and then we get a second attack step, which will once again trigger Ardyn's ability, so we can reanimate a second creature in that same turn. So that's incredibly powerful and can potentially lead to some one-hit KOs if we've set up our graveyard properly. And then other creatures we can reanimate include Zetalpa as a flying, double-striking, vigilant, trampling, and indestructible elder dinosaur, and it's got 4 power as a baseline, so turning it into a 5/5 with Ardyn is also an upgrade. And then we also have Sin, Spiros Punishment, a 7/7 flyer. When it enters or attacks, we can exile a permanent card from our graveyard at random and create a tapped token that's a copy of that card. If it's a land, we get to repeat this process, so we can potentially get back a whole bunch of lands at once, making it easier to just hardcast or curve toppers. But then we can also maybe reanimate a second creature and start going off. Giving Sin haste with Ardyn's ability also lets us trigger Sin twice, so that's also quite synergistic. And then if we happen to bring back the Red Overlord with Ardyn, those also have amazing synergy, since dealing 4 with lifelink means we also gain 4 life, and this will trigger once when it enters, and then once again when it attacks with haste, so that can be a huge life gain swing, especially useful against aggro. Then we also have a 1-off Valgavoth, which is also pretty difficult for most opponents to remove once it's in play, and can also double up as a graveyard hate. And then Summon Bahamut can also maybe destroy problematic permanents, and eventually draw some cards. Then we get to our actual reanimation effect. So we've mentioned Zombify, that's the most straightforward one, but having a few copies of Valgavod's Faithful is also useful. Can still maybe set up a reanimation on turn 4, although it is more vulnerable to creature interaction. Can always wait until turn 5 to play it and then activate, but being a creature also doubles up as something we can maybe bring back with Ardyn if we don't have any other targets, and we can also maybe get it back out of the graveyard with a Black Overlord, so it does have its advantages. And then finally, Rakdos Joins Up also has its advantages, reanimates a creature with 2+1 counters, and whenever a legendary creature dies, it deals damage equal to that creature's power to target opponent, so we have quite a few legendaries that can also maybe trigger that ability. And then last but not least, our miscellaneous section, I've included a Torture Tower. Can also maybe sacrifice some of our enchantments to bargain. Sometimes we actively want the Fear of Missing Out to end up in the graveyard, and can also maybe sacrifice an Overlord that we've impended, so it ends up in the graveyard where we can actually reanimate it. And then a Pyroclasm can help out against some of the go-wide creature aggro decks, like maybe green-white rabbits, since those decks can still be incredibly fast, so then reanimating on turn 5 can be too slow, and then we might want some interaction in the meantime. And then the mana base is also rotation proof. Restless Vents can also double up as another discard outlet to set up our graveyard. Theater helping us surveil 1 is also very useful. And then Fabled Passage I'm also including as another land that can maybe end up in the graveyard to set up Delirium for Fear of Missing Out. And then a couple more basics. The Verge land also very good with the surveil lands, and all the basics we're running. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the draw. Hand is functional. Just need to hit my land drops. Facing blue-red. If this is the Cauldron deck, we might be in trouble since we don't have ways to destroy artifacts in the main deck. And their own fear. And discards and opts, opponents digging for blue mana. Well, still gonna fear, discard Ardyn. And then hopefully Cauldron doesn't show up. Because we did draw the Zombify. It's gonna be a Geralf. So definitely a VV Cauldron deck, but maybe more combo oriented than the typical builds. Alright, so Torch, if I sack Fear, we add creature enchantment, we'll have instant. So don't quite have Delirium. What are we discarding with the Fear is the question. Maybe the Faithful since we drew Zombify. Yeah, I can maybe start there. See what we draw, maybe it's a tap land that I would rather play. Alright, so we can Zombify next turn. So bargain, sack a Fear. That's exiled. Theater doesn't seem strictly necessary. So yeah, no Delirium yet. So we'll just hang back. But having Fear in the graveyard is also something that we wouldn't mind reanimating with Ardyn at some point. And yeah, that was our last chance to play Cauldron. They didn't get it. So we do get to Zombify back Ardyn. Ardyn gets back Fear. Although, let's see. Yeah, I guess it is with Delirium, since we'll keep the second Fear in the graveyard. So this can discard an Overlord, so we keep Delirium once again. Oh yes, we're going off. Hit you for 5, untap Fear, trigger Ardyn again, which in turn gets back another Fear. And then finally get back the Overlord. So we're well and truly doing it. And that's just lethal here. 4 with lifelink, we gain 4, attack, deal another 4. Yeah, that's a turn 4 kill. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a hand that's just missing some big curve toppers. And then between Triumph and Tersa, we have the discard effects. So we shouldn't get run over by aggro. And in slower matchups, we should have more time to set up. Facing what could be an infect deck. Alright, a Rot Priest. Probably good to just destroy now before they can protect it. And at least our life total's not going to be under too much pressure. So Rot Priest down. Yeah, the infect deck can be pretty fast out of the gates. Play Tersa. Discard one land for sure. Do I discard a second? Yeah, I really need to find something to reanimate. I can still discard with events, perhaps. So maybe I discard Triumph and a land because of that. Alright, so now another Tersa could discard Overlord. And then we can zombify that at least. Possible this is more of an IV combo deck with the Rot Priest. Either way, we'll hit for 3, and then take it from there. Could have also considered animating the vents right now to just discard Overlord. Still kind of like Tersa, so we can dig a little bit deeper. They might also be sitting on some counter spells. Alright. Pyroclasm, a reasonable answer to a Rot Priest, so we don't need to necessarily target it. Opponent's gonna bounce Tersa, proliferate. So we can replay it if we'd like, or we can go for Zombify and Overlord. But if they have more bounce spells, it's maybe not the best play available. Crawling Chorus, keep up 3 mana. Yeah, I'm not loving the Zombify play in case they have that conditional counterspell. Right now it would be unless we pay 2 mana. So I could go Tersa and then discard Pyroclasm land. Because their opponent doesn't have Corrupted enabled yet. And yeah, there's Bring the Ending. So I'll pay 2. Tersa resolves. Could just ditch Pyroclasm, because next turn I can Zombify and pay for another Bring the Ending, which I kind of suspect they have in hand, given how they've been playing so far. No attacks, because we don't want them to get us to 3 poison. Sheltered by Ghosts, so now they get to 3 poison, and they have 2 mana left, so could be bad. Could just run back Tersa to test out the waters, although now with double Zombify, I may as well go for it. And then we can pay the wards to still destroy the chorus. But yeah, wouldn't be shocked to see another Bring the Ending. Yep, so things are playing out how we thought they would. If they pass again, there might be a third counterspell. It's going to be Mockingbird copying the chorus. They did tap out of blue mana. So yeah, I think it's safe to Zombify now. Again, Surveil first. Maybe we mill something better like Ardyn or Valgavoth. Although, how good is Valgavoth in this matchup? I think we prefer Overlord. Destroy Chorus, pay the ward. Get Tersa back. Discard Tersa, and then I don't think we're attacking. Because I don't want to exile something that I cannot cast right now, whereas next turn we can make use of that ability. Found Faithful, so that can bring back Valgavoth itself. Seed Core is active, so can pump their 1/1s into a 3/2. Chorus gets us to 5 poison. Yeah, all these poison cards are going to rotate out, so it's their last chance to play with it. May as well pump with a Seed Core. So halfway our normal life total, and halfway to getting poisoned. Alright, so Faithful get back. Valgavoth seems reasonable. Could also attack with Tersa first and then see what we hit. But then if I exile Valgavoth, that would be pretty awkward. I guess we could also hit Zombify. So sure, let's attack. Still going for the flying chorus. And we hit a land, that's fine. Play the land, play Faithful. If I reanimate Valgavoth, I wouldn't be able to block with events, so the absolute safest play, I guess, would be to just pass and then have 2 blockers available. We kill them on the way back. But maybe if they top deck another Sheltered by Ghosts, it's good to have a Valgavoth in play. That's harder for them to interact with. So they can still get at least 1 poison in. And that'll do it. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a reasonable hand. Just need to find our reanimation effect. But we've got a lot of discard and draw effects to get there. Facing black-green with Cecil, so kind of a mid-range deck. I'll play the Fear. Discards Ardyn for starters. Find another Terza. So if a Scavenging Ooze were to show up, it's important to still have a Bitter Triumph left. Or a Keen-Eyed Curator. Sort of surprised that they didn't wait to play it when they had the activation available. Could imply that they have more copies in hand. But yeah, still gonna try and enact my plan. And then if we get lucky and draw Zombify, we could cast it next turn. Get back Ardyn, which in turn gets back Zetalpa. Cut down the Fear, that's fine. And another Curator. Again, surprised it didn't just keep up the ability instead. Because that's just asking for trouble if we had a Zombify. Turns out we don't. So then now maybe Surveil and then play Terza. Carnosaur would also be an answer to the Curator. Unless they can get it to a 7/7 right away, which I guess is not impossible here. Since we have an enchantment creature in the graveyard already. So we'll see. Opponent just hits for 5. Cecil transforms. Could have declined to attack with Terza last turn to maybe avoid that situation. Curator has enchantment creature, instant land. So our opponent could respond by activating Curator 3 times, so that is probably a reason to just pass, wait for them to make the first move, and then I can respond to a Curator activation. So now at most they can get enchantment creature plus 1 more type, but the Curator's not going to turn into a 7/7 at least. So we've bought ourselves some more time. They can still exile Zetalpa. But we have a Valgavoth waiting in the wings. May as well chump since we're going to get a replacement Terza. They also have a Restless Cottage in the mana base, so they actually have even more graveyard hate. Yeah, this cannot be a good matchup. Had a window to Zombify, but we probably missed it. Bitter Triumph can deal with Shieldreds. Yeah, fight Terza, I'm just dying to Shieldred triggers. So I guess I'll pass. Hope they don't animate Cottage. If they do, it's still maybe better for me to wait than it is to take out Shieldred now, because then Cottage can exile Valgavoth. So Cottage animates. Can wait for it to turn sideways, respond to Cecil's trigger. And then now discard Valgavoth, take out Shieldreds, and then hope to top deck Zombify pretty much. Back up Cecil. There's Zombify. Problem now, our opponent played a Death Toucher, so they can actually trade for Volgavoth. But it's still gonna be the play here. Well, somehow still made a game out of it. Our opponent couldn't really have asked for a better hand. Possible they have removal left, and then they can pay the ward and still animate a creature land. It's gonna be a Scrap Shooter. And now go for the throats. Pay the ward. And Cecil can cross the finish line. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Hand is missing a reanimation effect. But we've got a lot of looks between milling, surveilling, discarding and drawing. And there's our Zombify already. So I'll keep the untapped land. So we can curve out pretty smoothly. Facing blue-white, so it could be control. No counter spells so far. There might be a Get Lost to destroy our enchantment. Also good answer to Ardyn. Happy to grab the Faithful. So Terza, discard Ardyn, plus maybe a land. And then we have 2 ways to bring it back. No double blue for 3 steps. So probably just relying on Get Lost, now Jace. Not gonna be around for much longer. It's gonna -2, milling me. That's kind of dangerous against a Reanimator deck. Now Terza can finish off Jace. Still in favor of discarding Ardyn, even though they might be more of a mill deck. And then maybe keep Vents over Theater. I guess now Terza will exile something at random. And sadly, it's Ardyn, so that's gone now. Well, that was pretty unlucky. We had a 1 in 8 chance. At least now Terza can provide card advantage, likely to hit a land drop. So do we attack, or do I still just play a Restless Vents, which can set up a second Ardyn a bit better? Yeah, I don't really care about getting a land back. But I do want to maybe attack with Terza, so we don't need to worry about exiling Ardyn again. So I don't need to cast Pyroclasm, even though we could, just to put a card back in the graveyard. But it's probably better this way. Now they do have Demolition Field, so that can blow up the vents. But we'll see. Elspeth is next. Can also Torch, sacking the Overlord to deal 3. So it's an interesting spot. One makes more sense. I guess I can attack with Terza, hope to exile Bitter Triumph. If I send in the vents, I'm discarding Ardyn, but then I wouldn't have the mana to cast Bitter Triumph. Yeah, tricky spot. Let's just take our turn for now. I guess if I Torch, I can still get back the Torch, since we do now need to have 7 cards in graveyard. We're not super likely to hit the Bitter Triumph though, so maybe I should just animate the vents. Attack Elspeth. Could also go for Sin, which would get back all those lands. That sounds tempting, because then we can just cast Ardyn, drew into another Bitter Triumph. That's useful. Vents does have Menace. So I could deal 3 to Elspeth, not enough to remove it here. So we can pass. But now our opponent does have a bunch of mana up, so they could keep up a counter spell. Also have the Overlord coming in next turn, so they might want to time that with a Sweeper. Elspeth makes more tokens. stock up. So they only have a single blue up at the moment. Can maybe Bitter Triumph Elspeth first to see if they have a counter. Because a No More Lies can still counter Zombify, but it won't be able to counter Bitter Triumph. Probably no point in torching anything right now. Alright, so step 1, Bitter Triumph. Discarding... I don't need to discard anything, I could just pay a life. Because if we can reanimate Sin, then I can just cast Valgavoth and Ardyn. So then I don't need to have them in the graveyard. But maybe one of them could still go, just to have some other options to reanimate. Is this counterproductive? Because Sin would really like to hit all those lanes, as opposed to getting Valgavoth back. So maybe I should just Zombify first, even if it might get countered. I guess even better would be to play Faithful, which, if they have a No More Lies, I can pay for it. And then I could still Bitter Triumph afterwards. The only drawback is I cannot reanimate Sin and Bitter Triumph now, since the lanes enter tapped. But I think it's worth it. So they get to keep Elspeth for one more turn. I get all these lanes. And eventually the Faithful as well. That was pretty sweet. Yeah, I guess there was still a chance I hit Faithful first. So that was the risk. And Overlord I can keep. Alright, Tarsan goes after Elspeth. Likely to see a board wipe next turn. If it's something like Sunfall, I can sack the Overlord to the Torch, so it ends up in the graveyard as opposed to getting exiled. Alright, opponent's gonna hit Vents. So now, if I have a Swamp left, which I should, I can actually still Bitter Triumph Elspeth. And they're not going to be able to Sunfall anymore, unless they still play an untapped land. So it might be just a Day of Judgment. Yeah, so now we get to destroy Elspeth. Just paying 3 is fine. And now we've got a massive mana advantage that we can put to use. I guess I did get to shuffle away my Overlord, but that's fine. So Ardyn, get back probably my own creature. Can still play a land out. Yeah, Ardyn, go for Sin, is probably the highest upside. Overlord also decent, since it can trigger twice, so that's good card advantage. Sin somewhat likely to hit the Overlord, so then we might get quite a bit of value. Don't need Torch anymore. Don't really need Zombify either, since we can just cast our stuff. Okay, hit you for 5. Trigger again. Now get to Overlord. Get back Fear. Bones at 10. Probably don't need to overextend anymore. And just pass. And then, yeah, we've got more burn with Overlord. Fear with Ardyn's a combo. Yeah, good to see Sin in action, just getting all those lines back. And now triggering twice as well with Ardyn. Still have our Vents in token form to maybe deal those last points of damage. Opponent's gonna just stock up. They're going for the alternate win condition of most cards in hand, but they're probably just digging for another Day of Judgment. Don't know if that's gonna save them necessarily. Beza, maybe? Opponent back up to 14. Can maybe start clearing their creatures, or we can use Carnosaur alongside Overlord. Have a lot of options. So Fear can discard the red Overlord, which is good to get back with Ardyn. Find another Fear. Okay, so can just cast it. Probably don't need Zombify. Find another Carnosaur, so we can use a few of those. Maybe clear the fish tokens. Attack. Get back the red Overlord. Immediately triggers. Can go upstairs. Go to attacks. Sadly, don't get to use the Fear of Missing Out for an extra attack step to trigger Ardyn an additional time. That would be the real Bombo combo here, but I'll take it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Our hand's not exciting. Need to hit some more land drops and find a reanimation spell. That being said, I do have Fear, discard Ardyn. That's a good starting point. Pyroclasm against Go White decks. Carnosaur for more removal. So we'll see how this plays out. We're gonna see quite a few cards before it's time to reanimate. And there's Zombify, so now I just need 2 more lands. Although blue-black might have something to say about it. I think discarding Valgavoth for starters. In case we didn't find another discard outlet, it's pretty powerful by itself. Especially against a deck that doesn't necessarily produce a lot of permanents. Okay, opponent might be more of a combo deck after all. So, don't have anything going on. Gotta hope they present a creature. Opponent discards Collector's Vault. So this could be a Sphinx combo deck. Maybe with Reenact the Crime. Yeah, there we see the Conspiracy Unraveler. Can they reenact it back? Nope, it's just gonna be a Jace for now. Still legal for 2 more weeks. It's an enabler and a payoff. So let's see. 3 damage to creature or planeswalkers, so we could Carnosaur, Jace, and keep Triumph for Unraveler. Seems fine. Alright, and we can Zombify. Now I kind of regret not having Ardyn in the graveyard, because I could have exiled the opponent's Unraveler as well. But, yeah. I guess I could wait for them to reanimate it. Although Valgavoth is pretty good too, since it's also acting as graveyard hate in a way. So we'll start here. Possible they have a Liliana to -2, make us sacrifice Valgavoth. Another card that's gonna rotate soon. Cruelty of Gix instead. Immediately gonna reanimate. Get back Unraveler. And we'll see how they proceed. But yeah, they can't really count on milling cards. Atraxa, I guess, can find more answers. Another card that's gonna leave us very soon, which is why I didn't include it in my build. Alright, still have that Bitter Triumph to maybe clear a path. So let's see, I could Bitter Triumph, discard Ardyn, and then I basically get to exile the opponent's Unraveler or Atraxa, so we can cast them for free through Volgavoth. There's also the Cruelty of Gix, which we could cast to steal an opposing Atraxa. So yeah, we have some powerful options available, and our opponent realizes that they're in trouble. Alright, sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a keepable hand. Just need to hit some land drops. Got Fear to discard either Zetalpa or Ardyn. Bitter Triumph can discard the other. Maybe start with Zetalpa, because it's better to reanimate by itself, whereas Ardyn probably wants some support. Alright, so now we just need a target for this Bitter Triumph, and then draw an untapped land. Could always Triumph for Own Fear, but ideally our opponent presents a target, and a Knight token will do nicely. So, may as well go for it now. Small chance our opponent's got Graveyard Hate here, and this could backfire. Flanker comes to mind at instant speed. Well, looks like we're not gonna do anything right now. Opponent not spending any mana, so it's possible they have a flanker in hand and they're just waiting for us to cast a Zombify. Alright, yeah, I guess we play Tersa and discard 2 more creatures and really hope there's no Graveyard Hate. But we're also just attacking for a lot of damage. Almost had Delirium. It's going to be a battle menu making a 2/2, that's fine. And another one so they can double block. Goes for Fear. Could actually be beneficial if we end up using Ardyn to get back the Fear. So it looks more like a tokens deck. So possible they don't have the flanker. But they are keeping up 3 mana once again. Could just be for Carrot Cake or Fountain Port. Pyroclasm is not bad here either. I think we still try and go for it. Zetalpa could still get exiled by a Sunfall. Ardyn could get hit by a Get Lost. So, yeah, it's an interesting position. I think I still will try and go for the highest upside play, since we have Rakdos joins up to try again. Do we see a Get Lost? We do not. So then if I get back the Fear, I would still have Delirium. Discard Bitter Triumph at this point. Could still be useful if Elspeth shows up, otherwise we don't really need it. Attack, untap the Fear itself. And then Ardyn would get to trigger a second time. Opponent's gonna double block, sack to Fountain Port, perhaps. But yeah, they seem dead here. As Ardyn gets back Zetalpa. Smash. And that's another 15 damage. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a functional hand. We've got some interaction, ways to fill the graveyard. Fear can discard Zetalpa. And then we have our Rakdos joins up in hand already. So just need to get to 5 mana. Step 1 Fear, next turn we can use Overlord. Opponent seems to have a cut down in hand. Still legal for the next 2 weeks, but then it is gonna rotate out, so we'll have to wait and see if we get a viable replacement. Opponent passes with what could be a counterspell available. I'll still impend, and then can play a tapped theater. One Zombify hits the graveyard to get our fear back. And do I want another one? Not necessarily. And then putting it in the graveyard still maybe lets us reanimate it with Ardyn. So this turn could play Fear, discard a land. Could pay for Phantom Interference by keeping up 2 mana. So that might be worth it. And just discards either Pyroclasm or the tapped land. Let's go with Pyroclasm. Find Carnosaur. So if our opponent taps out, we can maybe try Rakdos Joins Up next turn. If they keep up a counterspell, I might take a different approach. Opponent had a Feybloom trick, so maybe it is fairies after all. Take 2. Is there a ninjutsu happening, perhaps? Pick up a token for Kaito. Alright, that's fine. Now our opponent only has 1 mana up.
Don't worry, Pom-Pom-chan. I've got this.
So unless they have Spell Pierce or maybe a bounce spell, they're not going to be able to really interact. And they're just going to cut down Fear now. Fair enough. Alright, so pretty straightforward. Rakdos get back Ardyn. And then Ardyn gets back Fear. Which lets us discard and draw. Make it Carnosaur. Fear gets to attack Kaito. And then, since we have Delirium enabled here, we get to go again. Yeah, I guess we can go for another Fear. Would I still have Delirium? Sorcery, land, creature? Not quite. So then I probably don't bother getting back another Fear, but I could just go for Zetalpa, and yeah, our opponent scoops it up. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a reasonable hand. If Faithful survives, we can use that to reanimate Zetalpa. If not, we still have Zombify. Now, will Zetalpa be good enough is the question, up against what could be a red goblins. For now we can play Fear as our discard outlets. Do have some spot removal for maybe their key goblins. For now Engineer. Opponent gets their speed up with a Bastronaut. So I think I would rather Bitter Triumph than play Faithful here. And then I'll add another Fear to the graveyard, useful for Delirium. And then the Howl Squad's a good target for Triumph. Question is, do I pay 3 or discard? Could just discard the Faithful. Might regret it if I draw another Curve Topper that I then could potentially reanimate. Yeah, maybe I should still pay 3 for now, since our opponent's going to be able to get their speed up no matter what with their Menace creature. And then next turn Zombify Zetalpa. And then now Fear can certainly attack for 2, since we get to untap it. Do I want to keep it back? If I attack a second time, I get my opponent to 16, and then attacking twice with Zetalpa would be lethal next turn, so that seems good enough. And our opponent scoops it up. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a reasonable hand. Overlord to fill the graveyard, and then Zombify to reanimate. hope to find some discard outlets along the way. Alright, perfect. Get back Tersa. And then next turn I can discard Ardyn. And then Ardyn get back Zatalpa or Carnosaur are both decent. Opponent is on Jeskai, so control is going to make it harder for us to resolve our reanimation effects, although we have more than one. So don't really need to keep Bitter Triumph. Just want to hit line drops. And then hope that they have counter spells as opposed to Graveyard Hate. The events could also discard Sin at some point. Okay, so let's get the Zombify countered. Possible they just have a Get Lost for Ardyn. Opponent's gonna exhale. Get in for 3. Next turn, try again. Yeah, if their answer is Get Lost, then reanimating Zatalpa would maybe make a bit more sense. Opponent taps out for Rediscover, so they were maybe out of answers. But now we get to join up, get back Ardyn, which in turn gets back Zatalpa. And then they're going to need a very specific board wipe to survive. Alright, so we got to see this black-red rotation-proof Reanimator deck in action. And yeah, Ardyn is a very scary card if you do get to go off with it, but it is a bit more vulnerable than some of your indestructible options or cards that can maybe provide immediate value and can simply be removed by instant speed interaction. But yeah, this build still has a lot of potential. I liked interactions with Fear of Missing Out especially, so that's really the core we're trying to build around. Tersa seemed like a great inclusion as well, since we often want to discard 2 cards at once to set up Ardyn, so those have decent synergy, and then being able to find all of these creatures with our Black Overlord is also quite useful, so I like the creature dense approach as opposed to maybe playing other discard outlets. There's definitely still some flex slots available. Maybe with the next expansion we'll get more answers to opposing artifacts that we can include in the main deck, and then we can also maybe deal with opposing Graveyard Hate, because that's of course going to be the main weakness of a strategy like this. So if you come prepared with enough Graveyard Hate in the main deck, it's definitely a beatable plan. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.